Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the final webinar of Business Analysis Career Start, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University, or CSU. My name is Guy Coward, and I'll be your MC. Your mentor is Karen Sleeman. Just a heads up, we're having a few technical issues. Karen's struggling to log in. At worst, we'll just go to we'll get her to phone in and she can go through her presentation and I'll go through the slides from my end. If that happens, Angus, just make sure you tell me what's going on in the chat and we'll try and figure it out from there. Always a bit of fun when we do it like this. But I think I'll start with a bit of a spiel on the exam that's coming up. Of course, after tonight's webinar, that'll be it. The webinars will be finished and the exam will be available. So it's an open book exam and there's 40 multiple choice questions. In order to access the quiz, you'll need to pass all of the weekly quizzes that we've had after each webinar, and you'll only have, once you do access the exam, 1 hour to complete it. So we really recommend making sure that you go through all of the available resources just to make sure that you're ready to take the test before you actually start it, as there's only 1 hour. The computer, sorry, that's a little bit flustered, as you might expect and be hearing, but once you start the exam, the countdown timer does not stop for any reason. So if you're in a bad internet connection zone or anything along those lines, you'll need to make sure you hit us up on the short course email address and we can give you a reset. Other than that, I think it's probably time that we ask Karen to phone in and I'll start sharing the slideshow. So if you bear with me one moment. Again, sorry about this, folks. We're just contacting Karen, who will get to call in. Can you please, if you can see my slides, let me know that you can see them. Thank you. All right, so I'll start the show. Alrighty. So once Karen phones in, I'll be able to make it so that she's the one yapping away as opposed to me. And in the meantime, are there any excellent singers who are in attendance so I can share their mic? Or if anyone's from Victoria, has anyone got exciting news or plans for the Melbourne Cup holiday? Zan's going shopping. Lots of people avoiding the race from the sounds of it. If anyone asks me to sing a particular song that I know, I will sing it, but I'm not going to tell you which songs I know. So sorry, Yangchen. And just a reminder to set your chat function to all panelists and attendees. And I may as well go over the exam settings again whilst we're waiting for Karen to call in. So again, it's an open book test. which means you can open all the tabs you need to find the correct information. But again, we recommend, you really put in a bit of effort, make sure you get the maximum out of the short course, and take the test in such a way that it represents what you would get in the paid courses. 40 multiple choice questions, which you have 1 hour to complete. Once the timer begins, there's no way to stop it. So make sure you're in an excellent setting to take the exam, or else you might encounter a few issues. As you can see with the 4th dot point, it says credit toward your qualification. Should you pass this exam and the short course, and 2 other IT Master free short courses, it actually qualifies you for a subject credit towards our paid masters or postgrad degrees. So if you're looking at doing a project management postgraduate qualification, you can do this one. We've previously done another business analysis short course, which you can look for at our website, and any of the other project management short courses, and earn a subject credit that way. We'll recognize that as prior learning. The exam will be available at the end of this webinar. It might take me a little bit longer. We'll try and figure out what's going on and fix everything up. And the exam will be available in perpetuity. However, we strongly recommend that you try and sit the exam in the first couple of weeks, because what will happen is after 2 weeks, we'll close the forums to new comments and threads, which will make it impossible for anyone who hasn't already posted in them to earn points for forum participation. These are a really excellent and easy way to get some extra marks to boost your score in the exam, or in the course mark overall, not the exam. So the maximum you can get for a course is 100%, but if you get slightly less than 100% and post in all of the forums and participate in all the forums whilst we're monitoring them, you can get extra marks. So we'll be sending out reminder emails probably tomorrow or the next day, as well as in a couple of weeks, just to make sure that you know when we're going to close the forums. And then after that, the exam will just be available and you won't be able to earn marks for forum participation. Karen, it appears, is in. So you might be able to chat. Hello. So you're on the telephone.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I've had some technical difficulties this evening, so I've joined you via telephone, but I can see the slides and I am in the webinar looking there at what Guy's telling you about the exam. So good luck with that one, everyone.
And Karen will go over that at the end of the webinar as well. We'll probably run a little bit over time, but that's okay. And there'll be plenty of time for questions. Only 6 slides tonight. But thanks, Karen. Sorry about all that, everyone. Thanks for being so flexible, Karen. And now you finally get to shout out in the middle of a webinar slide and have someone change slides for you. So that's very exciting.
I should get a little bell or something, I feel, like a little tingle.
Gong?
A gong would be lovely, a drum roll. Guy, for letting everyone know there about the exam. Good to see you giving everyone the info on that one. I will just do a couple of quick sort of tips and things at the end for everyone as well, just to give you a bit more insight as to some of the content and whatever, and some of the hot tips on what to study for. But I'm sure you'll all do really, really well. So I'll get Guy to just move to the next slide for me, because this is our very last topic in the BA Career Skills webinar series and the short course that you've been doing. And in this topic, we are going to be talking about building a BA career. So in our previous couple of weeks, back on week 1, we were talking about the objectives of the BA, looking at identifying the business need, looking at solving a business problem, and working out what is the true nature of that problem, and also what is the organisational environment that you're working in, and also the organisational environment outside as well. So we talked about those things, and in the second week, we covered the first lot of core skills for the BA. So you will remember way back 2 weeks ago, seems like a lot longer, but we started to talk about some of the skills, the softer skills in terms of BA roles. So we started to talk about building rapport. We talked about time management. We talked about verbal communication and listening skills. And then in week 3 last week, we moved on to some of the more technical skills of the BA. So we talked about things like process mapping and modelling. We talked about validating and verifying requirements. We talked about documenting requirements and some of the other written communication skills that we would need to be effective BAs. And we also talked about conflict resolution and negotiation skills, and also change management crept in there as well, because we started to talk about the effective role that the BA plays in making sure that the change that we bring about, the solution that we implement in order to solve the business problem, is one that sticks around in the organisation for a long time, and one where we don't end up going backwards to the old way. So we talked about all of that. Could I get a change of slide there, Guy, if you've got time? And this week we are going to talk about building a BA career. So there's 3 main points that I want to cover in this evening's webinar, and these are backed up by your pre-recorded audio. You'll notice this week's a little bit shorter than the other weeks, and the reason for that is because obviously you're going to have a bit of time there to study for your exam as well. But in topic 4, we're going to talk about gaining experience as a BA, because we have talked about the fact that many people come to the BA role from other roles, that there's no one pathway to becoming a BA, that it is a bit of a career that you can forge from other careers, and one where you can opt to be a generalist BA, or you can choose a specialist field of business analysis. So I want to talk about gaining experience as a BA, where to get that experience, how to get that experience, and if you're just starting out and thinking that business analysis for you, where do you find those BA roles? How do you land those BA roles? How do you get BA experience and get into those jobs? And how do you build an effective network for yourself as well? So they're the main parts or main subtopics of topic 4. So Guy, I'll get you to move to the next slide for me. This one's all about gaining experience as the BA. So as I've mentioned, there's more than one way of coming into a BA role. For many of us, I know for myself, I gained experience as a BA by acting in a BA role whilst also performing a functional role. Now, I remember that when we first started this short course, we did a little poll, and Guy and Angus ran that poll and found that a lot of you had an extensive amount of experience as BAs, some of you over 5 years experience as BAs, but a lot of you actually didn't have much experience as BAs, and you were either looking to create a BA career for yourselves, or you'd been thrust into the role, and that is what happens to a lot of people. So they're accidental BAs. They're performing a functional role. They might be a subject matter expert, or they might be involved in a project in some other way, and somebody sees a bright spark in that person, and it's probably you know, because of your skill set and some of the core skills that we've talked about. Perhaps you're really good at building rapport with people and, you know, managing stakeholder relationships. Perhaps you're just a really good communicator, both verbally and in written communication. Perhaps you get abstract concepts and you make something that seems quite complex, quite simple to people, and actually that's quite an art. I was speaking about that to someone the other day, and they said he's the kind of guy that makes something really simple seem really complex. And I thought, just about anyone can do that. Anybody can take something simple and make it sound more complex than it actually is. But it's a very rare person and a very good BA that can actually do the opposite, which is to take something that is complex and make it appear simple. And that's part of what the BA does. And so, you know, perhaps you've shown some talent in that area. Perhaps you're a really good questioner. Perhaps you're someone who goes to meetings and has a bit of an analytical mind, a bit of an investigative focus on things, and gets to the heart of matters by asking people in the meetings the right questions. And so if you've done those things, if you've shown those BA skills, if you've shown those traits, it's likely that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder at some point in time and say, hey, have you ever thought about being a BA? Or I've got this work here that needs to be done. I've got a problem that needs to be solved. So oftentimes our managers or our supervisors don't actually know that they want a BA. They just need someone to solve a business problem, and you seem like someone who has the capability of doing that. So you may come into or walk into the BA role from that perspective. One of the main things to do if you are interested in becoming a BA and you'd like to fulfill a BA role is not to necessarily even ask to be a BA, but to the ability to focus on that kind of work rather than the title. So whilst you may not land a role that actually has the title, business analyst, you may have a role that talks about, process improvement or, IT systems improvement or something along those lines. It really is still BA work, and it's really important to focus on the work, I think, and not the title if you're trying to gain experience as a BA. So perhaps asking your manager for some meaningful work that involves you negotiating and talking to stakeholders, involves you understanding business process maps, involves you going out and investigating potential solutions to business problems. That's still BA work, and it's still going to get you a foot in the door. It just may not be, the BA title. And part of that, I think, is because of a lag of understanding of BA work. If you do a very quick Seek job search, and actually it's a pity my technical problems have happened tonight because I actually had 4 or 5 roles to show you that are really good examples, but you can find them yourself. If you just go to Seek and you enter into the search box there business analysis or senior business analyst or process analyst or technical analyst, you'll see all of the different job titles that match that description. And what you'll see is some very common threads. And now that you've been through the core skills of the BA parts 1 and 2, these will be very familiar to you. Ability to engage stakeholders will be one of the selection criterion. Ability to prepare process maps, ability to analyse and investigate business documentation to find solutions to business problems. These are the things that the BA does, as you know. So focus on that work. Don't necessarily focus on the title because, I think as the business world plays catch up to the importance of business analysis, more and more and more now you're seeing BA roles being properly described and properly advertised. But going back not so long ago, if you did a Seek search for business analyst, you'd find that what they actually wanted was an accountant. And now I'm seeing that less and less, and I'm seeing the true nature and the true role of the BA described in positions with that title. So whilst the world plays catch up with that, just focus on the work and not so much on the title or the position that you're going to hold, because it really is about getting the experience. When you are trying to get into, I'll just jump down a couple of points to industry certifications and then come back up to some of the other points I want to make. When you are talking about industry certifications, if you're going to apply to the IIBA for, say, your CBAP or your professional, you do need to log your hours as a BA. So it's very important that you start doing that now. One of the things that I learned a little too late was that to prove my worthiness for certain industry certifications, I had to provide a log of the number of hours I'd spent on a variety of different projects. And so that left me trying to struggle to put together the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years of my working career and say, well, what project was I working on between August and December, and then what project was I working on there? And because I'd worked on several projects simultaneously at times, it was very difficult for me to try and put those hours together. And even though I wasn't working in a role where I had an official BA title, I was still doing BA work. And so, therefore, I added that into my log of hours. So I might have been known as the, whatever officer or, in that functional role, but I was still doing the gathering of requirements, the process mapping, the recommendations for improvement, all of those sorts of things. So as you start working and doing BA type work, start making a note of that. Start making a note of the skills that you have and the work that you're doing, because it will help you a little bit later on. You may not be thinking about going down the track of industry certifications just now, but if you do, then know that you will need to provide that kind of evidence. And so it's a good idea to be mapping that and logging that as soon as possible. So comments and contracts, I just wanted to hit on those very briefly, because they are opportunities. So most organisations nowadays are running projects. And usually they will try to find people on the project team to fulfill a BA role exclusively. If it's a very small project or it's not a very complex or very important project, usually they'll just expect a subject matter expert to play the role of BA, or even worse, they'll expect the project manager to play the role of BA. And I've done that many times as well. But for larger projects, more important projects, projects that have got a bit of standing in the organisation, they will try to second in a BA. Now, there's a couple of ways that they can do that. They can either find someone internally who, like yourselves, has shown the ability and the eagerness to want to stand in a BA role for a little while, or they can go outside and they can get an external consultant to come in and fill that role. Now, one of the great things about being a BA, a lot of my colleagues who have done BA work in the past have simply gone from one contract to the next. So whilst these contracts are quite short term and there's no longevity of work there, so, you do your 6 months of work or whatever, and then, if the project finishes on time, you're out the door on time, and then you're on to the next role and the next role. So around about half to 3/4 of the way through your existing role, you'll be looking for the next one. And it might seem a little bit hard because I know we all have financial obligations and we've all got to put food on the table, but it can be really exciting and really challenging to have different options available to you and different contracts available to you. And I know quite a lot of BAs who make a really significant and good living just bouncing from one contract to the next. And the great thing about business analysis is you're always in hot demand. So if you do a Seek search for business analysis, you will find that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of roles on the go at any one time. And these are not poorly paid roles. They're mostly very well-paying roles. So, whilst a full-time permanent BA, you're probably going to be on the $90 to $100 an hour. If you are more likely to be on a contract, a 3-month, a 6-month, a 12-month contract, you could be charging upwards of $750 to $1,000 a day for your efforts. So it does make it quite attractive, and it does mean that you can have a little bit of downtime sometimes between contracts and still make an above average salary for the year. So it can be quite rewarding. But if you are interested in just maybe dipping your toe in and not losing your permanent role, maybe think about a secondment where you can go on and, play the BA on a project, get some experience as a BA without necessarily making a commitment to the BA profession, and just see how that goes for 6 months, 12 months. See if you enjoy the work, see if you enjoy the challenge. And if you do, then, look for other secondments, other contracts, other opportunities. And you don't necessarily need to go down the track of being a consultant, but you can look for opportunities in your own organisation as well. Being a BA in a professional role, so some of you may, through this course and through other courses and other certifications, have really whet your appetite to become a BA, and you may be thinking, this is the dream job for me, this is exactly what I want to do, I don't want to dip my toe in, I want to go all the way here and become a BA in a professional role. There's a number of ways you could get there. Usually a business graduate is someone who might be interested in becoming a professional BA, and it really is about applying for the roles then with the titles. It's really about, looking for a junior BA role or a BA role, or, looking at, other roles that are similar to that to try and get your foot in the door as a BA. And then combined with a certain level of experience and perhaps a couple of industry certifications, you can then move on and get more senior roles and things as time progresses. Pardon me. Usually the senior BA is one who's managing a team of junior BAs. And in that senior level, you're usually expected to do more than just the BA work. Whilst you're responsible for overseeing the team of BAs, you're also responsible for the mentoring and the coaching that comes along with that. So helping other BAs, who have just entered into the profession to hone their skills and to become better at what they're doing as well, and to provide that guidance and direction to junior BAs and a team of junior BAs. So that's quite rewarding work as well. Getting to be a mentor is a very rewarding thing. You can find plenty of young, eager junior BAs who will be interested in having a senior BA as a mentor. But I'd suggest you definitely get your experience up to, you know, at least the 5-6 year mark before you start embarking on looking for those mentoring sort of opportunities. Other ways of going about business analysis, your formal training. So we're seeing more and more formalised courses in business analysis now. You know, back when I started, I think there was a 2-day and a 3-day fast start in business analysis and a, you know, advanced BA workshop that I could do. And that was pretty much all there was available. You know, you could do 5 days of business analysis training, you could call yourself a BA and off you'd go. Because I think back in those days, it wasn't so long ago, I'm not that old, but I think back in those days it was more about the experience. And whilst it still is considerably about the experience, and one of the things that you would be asked in a BA job interview is, you know, what experience have you got? Tell me about the projects you've worked on. Tell me about the outcomes of those projects. That's still going to be very relevant. I think more and more we're recognising now formal training as well as experience in the BA role. So someone who's got any sort of formal business related training, you know, perhaps a Bachelor of Business or, you know, an advanced diploma or, you know, something like that, is a good way to have a foot in the door. And of course, you know, once you've got that, then, you know, working towards things like your grad certs, grad dips and masters are definitely well sought after. One thing I did want to finish up on there before I move on to my next slide is just the general BA versus the specialist BA. So, you know, in years gone by, the BA was the BA and that was it. You were a business analyst and, you know, that was your job title, that was your role, that was the work that you did. But now more and more organisations are asking BAs to do specialist functions, specialist roles. So you'll see a lot of technical business analysts and a lot of, you know, process mapping experts, you know, those sorts of roles are being advertised now. So whereas you can opt to be just a, you know, your general BA that does all of that business problem solving, identification, you know, environmental analysis, you know, process mapping and modelling, gathering of requirements, you know, they're all in the BA generic skill set, and a lot of BAs are very comfortable with that because you get a large variety of different opportunities and you can work on just about any project and, you know, it's very challenging and very dynamic. A lot of BAs, though, are now opting to specialise. So they're finding that what's best is to have a look at something that they really enjoy. So you may find, as you're going through your BA career, that process mapping is what you absolutely want to do. Pardon me. And if you become a very, very proficient, very good process mapper, then that's a skill set that you're going to be able to use into the future. Pardon me. Just had a little cough there. Guys, can you move my slide? One. Gong. Yes, drum roll. I'll just wait for that to come up. I haven't seen a change yet. Coming.
Should it come up? Finding roles and building your network. I hope I'm sharing the right page.
That's okay. That's fine. Good. Yeah, so finding roles and building your network. So there's a number of different ways. We all need a network and, you know, you've probably already built up a substantial network in your current role and I'd encourage you to continue to build that. So I see a lot of you are quite active on things like LinkedIn in social media because some of you have added me as a contact since the start of the course. And you've probably added others as well from forums and things like that. It's a great idea because, you know, you can never have too many people in your network. You can never be talking to too many other fellow BAs. These people are going to be able to help you and you help them and vice versa with a range of different things, even if it's just to have a discussion every now and then on, you know, what's happening in the BA world. So I'd encourage you to have a look at the different options that there might be for membership and your professional bodies. You know, not everyone sees the value in these. I know that, you know, it's a couple $100 a year to belong to this organisation and that organisation. And, you know, you may not think that you're going to get value out of that. But I definitely think people do get value out of them, particularly if you're involved. Like if you just have your membership and it's just sitting there and you're not doing anything with it, well, yeah, I'd agree. It's probably of limited value. However, if you do make an effort to get to the events and to some of the nights and things like that, then you can get your money's worth out of it by building that professional network. So most of these professional bodies have, social evenings, they have guest speakers, they have business breakfasts. Check out what's happening in your local chapter and try to get along. Not all the time, I know.
It appears that we have lost Karen. Am I the only one? The old 45-minute phone call might have played havoc with the battery, or she might just be having an extended coughing fit, in which case we wish her well. Alrighty. I'll just go through a couple questions, I reckon, whilst we wait for Karen to come back in. And understanding, of course, that I'm not the expert, but can probably have a crack at a couple of them. We've got one from Jessica who's asked, between academic education and industry certification, which one is more helpful in landing a job in BA? And I can only assume that the answer will be maybe or something similar. It really depends on what the certifications are, what experience you have, what the job you're applying for is. I would assume that it's a great idea to get both, but perhaps I'm biased because I represent a university. It's certainly the case that industry certifications can help you get academic education finished, and certainly both will be useful and will augment the understanding that you gain from one or the other. And of course, there's just straight up experience that you get from your work as a BA, which hopefully you'll be able to go along with out of this course and out of the previous short courses you've taken part in. Okay. Jens has asked, is it possible to have is it a plus, to have a technical background as a BA? And of course that depends on what sort of BA you want to be and for whom you will be analysing the business. Of course, you would think that it can only be useful, but it's not going to be very relevant, I think, if it's got nothing to do with technology. Or perhaps you could say that technology is so pervasive now that maybe it is expected that BA should have some level of understanding. And I suppose to some extent BAs are a bit of a Caesar, everything to everyone. People have asked about the contents, the content list. We've got a bunch of additional readings up on the learn.itmasters.edu.au page. We finally got the glossary up as well, so you can go and have a look at all of those materials. Angus is just finding out what's going on with Karen, as you might be able to hear in the background. I'll look for some more questions. Bunch of them saying, and thank you for saying that they've lost Karen. Alarms asked, how can I find a mentor in the Sydney area? And I suppose the simplest answer is building that network. And I suppose using this course, leverage this course. There's literally hundreds of you who will be listening to either this live or in the recordings. So you can access the forums and you can say, hey, I'm from Melbourne or Sydney or wherever you're listening from. And there's no reason you necessarily need a mentor in the same city, although it might be particularly useful and nice to catch up and have a coffee or whatever. But yeah, feel free to use this short course as one avenue to that mentoring. And of course, you can get in touch with Karen, and maybe Karen would be willing to put you in touch with other people. It seems Karen's back.
I am sorry. I don't know what happened there. I got booted out for some reason.
That's okay. I've been
I did
talking
hear some of
absolute
those
rubbish.
questions. No, not at all. I did hear some of those questions. I wanted to just touch base on one of the questions there in relation to industry certifications and how valuable they are. I think they're becoming more and more valuable as time goes by. I think more and more now, if you just watch the trends in terms of the ads that you'll find, and if you're working with a recruitment consultant, you'll find now that they're more asked for than they've ever been. So years ago, you know, if you had the letters after your name, you'd certainly put them in and it wouldn't hurt. But I think now they're becoming more and more, you know, asked for and demanded. But also I think having a qualification is pretty important. So whether that's just your basic business qualification, and when you've got your BA experience on top of that, or if you've been, if you've got some sort of a project management qualification, that can work really well as well. Even though the BA role is so separate and so different to the project management, I think it's about that exposure to the project environment and the understanding of how projects work that makes those sort of qualifications, you know, so sought after. So I mean, there's not really that many formal BA qualifications. If you look even at the vet sector and you think, right, well, I want to become a project manager, you can do a certificate in project management. You can do a diploma, an advanced diploma, a bachelor's, a master's. There's no such course in business analysis, or there's very few. There's a few around, but there's not very many. And, you know, are they really, you know, what you're exactly looking for? So I think it's in place of that, and until the world catches up with that, I think, you know, your professional bodies and the certifications are probably one of the ways to go with that. We were talking about conferences and attending conferences, and I also wanted to touch on communities of practice as well, because, you know, in your organisation you might actually find that there are a group of BAs who are currently practicing. And, you know, if you can join in, even though you may not be a BA in a BA role, if you're performing BA work, they might be quite happy for you to come along and sit there and talk with them about, you know, business analysis stuff that's going on in the organisation. So I think that's definitely worth having a bit of a look at as well. And as I mentioned before, you know, your local chapters of your professional bodies, getting along to conferences and meeting people, adding people in your social media circles. One of the ones that, and I did talk before about, you know, having your senior BAs, you know, mentoring your junior BAs. When you're in that junior BA role, or you're in a BA role and you've got sort of less than 5 years of experience, see if you can find a BA mentor. See if you can find someone who's prepared to, you know, offer you that helping hand and that guidance in your BA career, because, you know, these people have trodden a path. And I'd put it to you that if they've been in the industry for more than 10, 15 years, they've seen a lot change in the BA industry as well. So oftentimes, you know, in a lot of occupations or a lot of industry sectors, there's not a huge amount of change. But because BA business analysis as a profession has grown so rapidly and has changed so much over the past 10 to 15 years, I think if you found a mentor that's been in the game for a while, they'd have a lot to share with you and a lot to tell you. And of course, last but not least is the volunteering. There's opportunities in your local communities to do business analysis work all the time. You know, your local schools and, you know, all of those sorts of things. I find, because people know in my local community that I am a BA and a project manager, that I get asked to take on these things all the time. And of course, it's unpaid and it is your personal time and all that sort of thing, but it is experience. And if you are going to go for, you know, some of what we're talking about before, logging some of your hours, and you're going to go for one of your industry certifications, you know, volunteering hours do still count. So have a think about where you might be able to volunteer. And the great thing about being a volunteer, even though you're not paid, you practice for free as well. So, you know, you do get an opportunity to build some of those core skills for the BA that we talked about in the previous webinars. You know, talking about, you know, building rapport with your stakeholders and, you know, process mapping. You know, it does take a little bit of time to get this stuff right. And so if you're doing it on a volunteer basis, then, it's all good. Everyone gets something out of it, and I think that's a nice way to pay back as well. Guy, did you have any other questions at this point?
There's a couple about specific certifications, helping to become a better BA. Is it fair to say that any sort of professional development would be something that would assist you?
I think with any professional development, I think you've got to be really targeted in your approach. And I wouldn't just say this to a BA, I'd say it to a PM, I'd say it to anyone in any industry. I think rather than trying to just go out there and do a little bit of everything, you've got to really have a targeted approach. And it really is about, being your own BA here. Where are you now? What's the current situation? And where do you want to be in 3 years or 2 years or 5 years or whatever your goal is in that time space? And then what's the gap? What's the problem? Where do you need to fill a gap in order to get from where you are now to where you want to be? And I think if you use that business analysis, that business problem solving approach in your own career, you'll be able to solve a lot of problems for yourself, because I think it is important that you have a target. I think it is important that you say, this is where I want to be in 5 years from now. I want to be a senior BA. I want to have be earning, X dollars in income. These are the skills that I want to have. I want to be mentoring junior BAs. I want to be a member of my professional body. I want to perhaps even be speaking at conferences about business analysis. They're all opportunities that are there for people if they're interested in taking that career path. Or you might say, I want to be a technical BA. I want to do 3 years of general business analysis, and then I want to, focus on being more of a technical analyst, or, wherever you want to go. There's heaps of options. But make that plan, sit down and make that plan and say, well, here's where I am now. Here's the current situation, and there's the to be desired future state. So what have I got to do to get myself from here to there? And that's your project, I guess. And that's your opportunity to say, right, well, if I can get, up to 200 followers on LinkedIn, or if I could find a mentor, if I could join a community of practice, if I can attend one conference a year, they're the sorts of things that are going to help, put your name out there. And particularly if you are interested in going out on your own and doing some consulting and doing some contract work, you really do have to kind of build a name. And people are going to ask you what experience you have, what qualifications you have, and where you've practiced business analysis. And, if you've usually taken the effort to become a member of your professional body, if you're studying, a graduate certificate or a graduate diploma program, and you've got an industry certification and 12 months of experience, they're going to look at you above somebody who's, freshly graduated and hasn't bothered to do any of those extra additional things. So, I think it's definitely a good idea to have a plan.
From the 3 to 5 year plan, maybe something far more immediately, far more immediate, I should say. Catherine's asked about someone struggling with a BA role as the project is very technical and the contract being nearly due. Is there any suggested strategy to extend the contract in the short term?
You could. I'd see if I could find someone to provide me with a bit of mentoring. And it may not actually be business analysis mentoring that you need. What you might actually need is someone to give you some technical mentoring. I know when I first started as a BA, because I was from the business side and I wasn't from the technical side, I found a lot of the technical stuff a real struggle to keep up with. I didn't understand. And sometimes when I felt I was in a room with people who used a lot of technical language, I felt like I was on another planet. And so I found that I got onto someone that I knew I could trust, and it depends how much time you've got, but I got onto someone who could help me decipher that language and really help me understand some of the technical aspects that were immediately needed so that I could get through the rest of the project. And from then on, I identified that was one of my skills gaps. That was one of my weaknesses. And so in my, 2-year plan or 1-year plan, my goal was to build some of those technical skills, and I went away and did that. But to get me through the project, I found someone that could help me.
Okay. Chris has asked a bit of a question, I noticed perhaps. Can you recommend any good evidence-based resources that support the continuous improvement process?
Not off the top of my head, but I could probably find some and pop in the discussion forum.
Rightio, I'll take a note.
That you could have a look at. Yep.
Beauty. And if anyone has any hot tips, feel free to chuck that in the forum before us. Alarm has asked about industry certification examples.
Yeah. So if you went to, look, I tend to hold IIBA up as the international standard. And the only reason I do that, I mean, there's other professional bodies too, and I don't want to discount their hard work and what they're doing in business analysis circles, because it's certainly very important. But I think the IIBA is probably the industry standard. And if you were going to start looking at a base industry certification, have a look at your CBAP. So it's your certified business analysis professional. It's really the one that I think most people are going to be needing to have in the very near future to get a BA role.
All right. So I guess one last one. Can you assess businesses? This is from a little while ago, but Chris, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong about my interpretation of your question. Can you assess businesses for direct investment, etc., without being in an employed role? Can those projects for industry certifications be personal or internal?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. Chris, perhaps could you just rephrase that? It seems like you're trying to get at something specific. Kelvin has asked about BA books. Is there a particular book you can reference, or do you think that the additional reading that we've got, that we've got a reading list, of course, on the Moodle page, is that sort of extensive enough, or is there something in particular, like the book? Uh-oh. Looks like we've lost Karen again. So perhaps we'll just wait and see if she comes back in the next couple of minutes. Saeed has asked, when will I be able to try the exam? Ideally, in the next sort of hour or so. And we might need to have a little bit of an understanding of what went wrong today before we start doing that. And we'll get back in when we can. I might go back to the final slide and start talking about that one until Karen comes back, and then she can give her professional tips. So of course, as I've said, open book, make sure you have a look at all of the resources that are available before you start, because there is only one attempt. Yeah, because the course exam is available for the foreseeable future, yeah, we can only give people one attempt, and we can't give people the answers to any of the questions. We just have the questions there in perpetuity. So only one attempt. Make sure you're good and ready. 40 multiple choice questions, only one answer for each one, which is a nice change from the usual Matt Constable fair where we have to get, a third of a point for each half answer or each multi-choice, multi-response answer. You've got 1 hour to do it. Shout out to Matt Constable, by the way. Hope you're listening. Hello. Time test, 1 hour. Make sure you're in a good spot where you won't get distracted for the full hour. And of course, there's credit towards your qualification. 3 short courses completed equals 1 paid subject qualification. If you're interested in information about more credit for recognition of prior learning, whether it's been a previous postgraduate study that you've undertaken, or these industry certifications that we've been talking about, then you can get in touch with me or IT Masters generally, and we'll be able to help you out, let you know where you are exactly in relation to recognition of prior learning, and then see whether that affects any decisions you might be weighing as to whether or not you want to study. The pass mark from Marion, thanks for asking that, is 50% for the exam. And if you take the exam before we close the forums, then there's a little bit of leeway because you can get some bonus points for posting in the forums. There's certificates for completing the course with a pass mark. So you'll be able to download those at the learn.itmasters.edu website, and they'll be available. We generally leave that to when we close down the forums. That way we can sort of make sure that there's no dud questions that 95% of people are getting wrong, for example. So the certificates will be released, and we'll send out emails with changes and with key dates about the exam in any case. So we'll keep you in the loop. Once you do complete the exam and the course, I'd really appreciate if you took a couple extra minutes to complete the course satisfaction survey found at the bottom of the IT Masters course page underneath all the course content. That quiz contains, quiz/survey contains a few questions related to the short course and takes only a few minutes. Your answers will be reviewed at the conclusion of the short course by the team as part of our improvement strategy. I expect that we'll see some. You should probably get your tech right, but that's an ongoing process. And I'm more interested in sort of your feedback around, you know, the quality of the course, the quality of the content. I can see that Karen's back, so we'll throw back to her in a couple seconds and maybe go back to finishing off a couple of the final questions. But I'd be really interested in, you know, your thoughts on the level of the course, whether you want to be stretched further, whether you want to be stretched less. It's quite difficult to cater for, you know, all different capabilities. So your feedback really will improve the quality of our courses and help us sort of guide which future courses we run. They really, yeah. I'll throw back to Karen. How are you going? Are you there? No, that's okay. What's the time? We're getting to 5 to the hour. I reckon what we'll have to do is, if it doesn't work in the next minute or so, I'll shut it down. If you have any questions, chuck it in the forum. And I suppose I'll just wind it up. So I guess, first of all, thanks, Angus, for support over the last 4 webinars. It's been great to have you on board. This is your first short course, and it's been lovely to have him. So make sure you thank him in the chat, folks. Karen, I think you might actually be able to hear me, but you might not be able to talk. So thank you for your organisation and flexibility. This is all IT Masters. This is all on IT Masters, particularly the short courses. I really hope that we'll hear more from you in the short course program. Importantly, thank you for those listening live or later on with the recordings. Your participation truly helps ensure that future short courses are developed and students are able to access free content, you know, into the future. I think they're incredibly valuable for, or I hope that they are valuable for people that are not at all interested in further education and just sort of view this as an opportunity to make sure that they're learning for life, and they're always filling the gaps and making sure that they're relevant. Also, I think it's of great use for people that are interested in postgraduate qualification and sort of trying before they buy. Thanks also for the great discussions in the forums. There's literally hundreds of posts in there and great threads. They've made the course much richer. Again, all short course exam information is on the course page, so have a look there before sitting it. I hope you've enjoyed the course. And Karen is not available to sign off, but I'll just sign off on her behalf. So thank you very much. Hope everyone's had a good time. Hope you've got something out of it, and feel free to keep on posting in the forums before the exam comes out, hopefully later tonight. Thank you.